OutKick 360 is back. Welcome in. Good morning to you alongside Chad Withrow and Paul Kuharski. I'm Jonathan Hutton, Lance Lee, Jakob Swanson, David Reed, the chairman of the board. They all make the show happen for us. A lot to get to today. Eddie George announced as the new head coach at TSU. We received a shout out from Azerbaijan. That's coming up. Plus Gary Sheffield Jr. will join the show. We'll talk Braves and Hustle and Acuna and much more. Gentlemen.
First up, Azerbaijan. Next up, shout out from Uzbekistan. Those are the big goals of this show, and that's what's going to happen. Paul,
let's work our way through the stands.
Okay, yeah. Afghanistan, Pakistan, all of them. That's what's next.
Kyrgyzstan, yeah, some of the fake ones.
Yeah.
What's Borat's from a stan, isn't he?
I believe so.
Kazakhstan.
Kazakhstan.
There you go.
That's an actual country.
That's a real one.
And the actual country actually banned the movies because of the way it makes the country look. So, yes.
What's up, guys?
Not much. Didn't bet anything last night. That felt like a little bit of a relief to me.
That's a win.
Yeah.
That's a win for Paul with the run we've been on.
Actually, I had a good Preds win the night before that, which really got me off of the whole Master schneid.
We will have the lines for the Preds. I think we should do a show bet later from FanDuel for the Preds tonight. We'll get into that.
Yeah, I've got
and
some
much more.
thoughts on what the Preds didn't do. Put some meat on that bone in the Tennessee Power Hour.
We have the NFL Draft's most overhyped. We've picked a player each from the first round. That's coming up in about 15 minutes. Not overhyped is the job that Julian Edelman did as a wide receiver for the New England Patriots. Announces his retirement, or expected to, after an 11-year career in New England where they let him go. He's got the knee issue, the injuries that held him out for the majority of last season. But, man, what a clutch player in some crucial times for that organization.
Terrific player in the, overall. But then you put him in the setting of the championship teams that he played on and the clutch plays that he made for that organization. And here comes again, it's a tribute to, by the way, they did a very nice video with his retirement thing. I thought, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it. The beam me up at the end is a little cheesy for me, but the production the production value of it in Gillette Stadium with him sitting at midfield, the camera kind of circling around him, what he had to say, the way they did the crowd noise and the lighting and everything, I thought was really, really nice.
He topped 100 catches in a season twice, 1,000 yards 3 times in a season. The connection between he and Brady, incredible. But in the playoffs, the second most catches and yards in history. Played in 5 Super Bowls. He won 3. Super Bowl MVP. You're about to see the unbelievable catch that he made against the Atlanta Falcons right
on the
here.
Batted ball where he dives with 3 Falcons around
incredible.
him, gets a hand under the ball before it hits the ground.
Clutch. Over and over. Clutch.
So I went on Clay's show this morning, and Clay posed the question about Julian Edelman, is he a Hall of Famer? And he broke it down in sort of can just your playoff performances, separate of your regular season performance, vault you into the Hall of Fame, which I think that's not the case at all with Julian Edelman. But my visit with Clay prompted this tweet from a guy named Trip Tepper, who says, it is the Hall of all caps fame, not the Hall of Stats. Edelman is borderline Hall of Fame. Carries far more fame than most wide receivers of his era.
That's silly.
If he made the Hall, I wouldn't quibble. Paul, you are a Hall of Fame selector.
We don't go
Your
in there
thoughts?
and judge a guy's famousness. I mean, you're being very literal if
Jim
you break
McMahon
it
would be in
down
the Hall
that
of
way.
Fame,
Right.
if that were
William
the case.
Refrigerator Perry
Yes.
would be in the Hall of Fame because he was very famous. Look, this is what I hate, because it's a tribute day for Julian Edelman, who was a very fine player and a defining player of a championship team, a key cog in a championship team, right? We're not going to think of the Brady Patriots without thinking of Julian Edelman. And that should be it, right? We should tie a bow on it. But in the social media era, immediately we have to ask if he's a Hall of Famer. And then I have to knock down his case. And I feel badly doing that. I used to have this with Frank Wycheck, who was a good friend of mine, and where I got my radio start in a big way on his morning show here in Nashville, where I grew to be a 3-time-a-week performer. And inevitably, 2 or 3 times a year, somebody would call in and make the Hall of Fame case for Frank Wycheck, and I would have to knock down the Hall of Fame case. And he was an innocent victim there. He'd say, I didn't say anything about being a Hall of Famer, but I have to sit here and listen to a case being made against me. Julian Edelman has 36 touchdowns and 620 catches. This is half of Hines Ward's career, and Hines Ward can't get in the room to be heard. You pointed out to Derek Mason.
Yeah, speaking of a Nashville connection, it's half of Derek Mason's career.
Hines Ward may get into the final 15. Derek Mason's never getting into the final 15 to be discussed. So, I mean, Julian Edelman was terrific. But Julian Edelman is a guy who's in his team's ring of honor and is a Patriots all-time great, and a guy we're going to remember as a key guy on a championship team. And there's no dishonor in that. But then when you say, well, he's not a Hall of Famer, it sounds like you're talking badly about him. I'm not talking badly about him. I love the guy. I think he's a terrific player. But then I go on to say he's not a Hall of Famer, and everybody's like, bummed, oh, man. You know, and it sounds like you're berating the guy.
It's okay to be the guy that never has to buy a drink again in New England.
Right.
Right? I mean, that's
a lot of places.
That's Julian Edelman. I mean, that's who he is. I thought the same about Johnny Damon. No one's making an argument for Johnny Damon as a Hall of Famer, but if he didn't go to the Yankees, he would have been a guy who never bought a beer in Boston or anywhere around New England because he was a Red Sox legend with that team and that run. And I think Julian Edelman is just a key cog on offense of those great Patriots teams. I also automatically think about the fact that Tom Brady refers to him as Jules, which I find funny for some reason.
Well, he's also a part of that group that we stacked together of the Patriots outside of Brady, and Brady's a part of it too, honestly, as a 6th-round pick. But
value,
yeah, the value that they found and how they mold players to fit the system of what they wanted to accomplish as an offense.
And you heard, like,
right?
Who was it when the Eagles beat the Patriots, and then they mouthed off a little bit? Was it Kelsey who said, yeah, they don't have any fun over there. Like, we really have fun.
Yeah.
Well, tell Julian Edelman that. Julian Edelman appears to me to have had a great deal of fun winning the Patriots' way. As hard as the Patriots' way.
Let's put Edelman on a different team and see how much fun he has. More.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but
maybe.
he still,
but
he
in
got
the
his fun
context
in.
of what he was in with Brady and mastering that thing, they had a hell of a lot of fun winning, and they put their stamp on an era of football, but right, a decade plus. Edelman played, 12 years. Injuries get to him. Small receivers like that tend to, nobody finishes great. Small receivers like that tend to really not finish great. But he's a terrific player. And he's got that signature moment, which you really like, that catch, Hutton, that you were good enough to find for us that we could play on there. A Super Bowl catch in the middle of the field that you think about with the David Tyree catch. I do.
Well, but also the passes, the touchdown pass to Amendola from Edelman. Like, there are clutch moments that stick with you that stand out over a wide receiver that has twice as many stats as he does.
Well, it's
absolutely
what
true.
I appreciate about him, and Bill Belichick pointed this out, and I love the statement about he does everything. He's one of those guys. He's a throwback player in that he can do it. He can run. He catches well. He runs good routes. He can return. He's a great blocker. He's a throwback player that he's like the classic, 1940s, 50s era two-way player if you needed him to play both ways.
Belichick eats that up.
And Belichick loves the history of the game and loves guys like that. And this will kind of bleed into our Ronald Acuna Jr. discussion later, but one of the reasons I love Acuna is because he does everything. He is a five-tool player that excels at an elite high level in all of those areas. And I don't think Julian Edelman, I wouldn't say that he was elite in all those areas, but he was a guy who could do everything.
Total package.
Yeah.
A total package guy. Not an elite total package guy, but like in baseball, you call him five-tool player.
Yep.
As a receiver, he did everything he could do as a receiver. And he did it well and reliably, right? And reliability in a program like the Patriots is the number one thing. Availability and reliability. His availability faded. And
it also doesn't it stand out more now? Of course, I mean more now, even more so now, and it did 5 years ago. Of a player that ends his career, a decade-long career with the same organization. 11 years in the same spot, and didn't just ask to be released and go stick around for another year somewhere else?
It means a lot, and I think that his health and his knees will prevent him from doing this. But I still firmly believe if he's healthy and has any itch at all, and Daddy Tom comes calling,
Look out.
he will be in Tampa in no time and join that group. If, in fact, he's healthy again because he's not active and he's not playing football every day, and it's a similar situation to Gronkowski, sits out a year, and then a year from now, Brady calls, I could totally see him coming back to play.
The one thing about that is the shape of the Bucs roster. So Scotty Miller's in that role, and Scotty Miller is a younger, better, faster, fitter.
One injury.
So if they
Chris
have
Godwin
injury-
goes down, Scotty Miller goes down, he picks up the phone in week 3, Daddy Tom comes calling, you answer Daddy Tom, Tommy Boy's call. And that's what Edelman, Jules. Once Tom Brady picks the phone and says, hey, Jules, come win another title with me, you go.
What are the odds that Brady puts out something cool on social media today about Jules? I think probably 95% that we hear from him, and it will be something very cool, very classy about his buddy.
I always, what strikes me is just our time with Logan Ryan and the practice time that he would talk about going against Julian Edelman.
That's a good memory.
That he said the battles and one-on-one and practice and the mentality, the winning, excellent, the strive for excellence on both sides of the football improved him as a player. I would imagine Edelman's the same way. But the trash talk in practice, he said, was more than what he would have on game day playing with the Patriots.
And that gets you ready. That training camp month working against that quality, boy, that does a lot for you. And you think of another team where you don't have the combination of both a great slot defender and a great slot guy on offense, and you don't get that.
You know what else is amazing? And Paul, you said you hate how bad arguments about Hall of Fame status
Diminish guys.
makes you hate the fact a guy retires and immediately you're on the defensive, poking holes in their Hall of Fame status. How we view quote-unquote cheating in sports. Who is talking about Julian Edelman getting popped for PEDs?
No one.
Suspended?
No. In football, it doesn't matter.
If this was a baseball player, though, that would be all. That would be in paragraph
first
2.
Off, we wouldn't be
at the
talking
most,
about Hall of
probably
Fame.
paragraph 1.
We would be talking about Hall of Fame.
Right.
Well, or it'd be a one-sentence thing. He would have been talked about for the Hall of Fame, except for the steroid thing.
Hutton and I were looking at pictures and videos of Edelman before the show, and I pointed to one. I said, here's a guy on roids. I mean, you just see his arms. I'm like, this is a guy that was physically taking something. You don't get that way naturally. But we don't care. I mean, we don't talk about it. He was suspended for it. It's incredible to me, and I'm using roids in a broad sense.
Different
I'm sure
standards.
there's some pharmacologist out there who'll correct me and tell me what it
Entertain
is.
me.
It's something that's going to make you stronger and faster.
Produce and
Or
entertain.
healthier.
Yes.
That's the standard.
Hutton's in favor of legal steroids
I'm kind of coming around to Hutton's stance on this when it comes to
for baseball.
if you're
Forgive me
taking
for
it at
liking
your
the long
own
ball.
risk,
Yeah, for baseball.
if you know the risk involved and you're taking some, I mean, and it's to extend your career or, as you said, Hutton, to entertain.
Well, that's why. Yeah, I mean, I'm not. I don't feel any shame in loving the late '90s and the steroid era of baseball.
I think that's.
I compare my fandom then to now.
Yeah.
And I was more of a fan then.
I'm more of a traditionalist in that I don't like what it did to skew the record books, which is the main objection to it, right? I want to know what Bonds versus Mantle versus Ruth versus
When the
Aaron
schedule
would
went from
be.
144 to 162, was this a big gripe? I know that we weren't around covering sports
it was.
at the time.
There's an asterisk on.
But is that, I mean, is.
How often does that come
Mantle.
up now?
But do we talk about it now?
Well, no, because no. A, those people aged out, and B, the steroids argument became the new one that overtook it. That's my primary objective. My primary objection.
Right.
I want the record stuff to be equivalent. That's my one thing with the 17-game thing. 14
well, the
to
records
16,
aren't equivalent anyway.
14 to 16.
Guys are shattering records right now.
No, I know. But
There'll be another Drew Brees in 20 years.
I agree. I want
Because of the rules.
Yeah, I agree, and that's why I hesitate on the rule changes that favor offense and stuff. But baseball is the record game, right? So in baseball, I want things that make it as possible as can be for us to compare a record from the 1950s to a record in the 2020s I want that to be as possible as can be.
Well,
That
I
is a
just
legitimate
think you can
comparison.
always make an argument. I get when you're talking about illegal drug use benefiting you, but there's always going to be arguments between the eras of why one era was better or worse or fair or unfair. I remember the HBO movie 61 about Roger Maris, and there's a part in there where Mickey Mantle is going off on everybody, says, oh, it's 162 and not 144. And he says, yeah, Babe Ruth didn't have to play night games. Babe Ruth didn't have West Coast trips.
Sure.
There's a lot of things that Babe Ruth didn't have to deal with also in his era. I just think, and that's a classic example of you can always find something to give you what you're wanting to argue.
I
right?
agree. Also,
We're measuring the spin rate of a baseball now.
Oh, I know.
And we're complaining about guys in the steroid era hitting home runs.
but I think you'd also agree with this. In that era, which I enjoyed too. I mean, we all got caught up in McGuire and Bonds.
But beyond McGuire and Sosa, and bringing baseball back, I mean, there was
Brady.
every team had a player like that. It wasn't just those two guys.
Right. But you also had guys under those guys whose stories we don't know because they fell out because they didn't do it.
I wouldn't know about those guys because their stories fell out because I was dead. The baseball was dead to me after the strike, and I didn't care. The home runs brought fans back to the ballpark at a fervor pitch, and we haven't. I mean, again, like I crave those days.
I'm just saying there were two sets of rules. So if you broke the rules, you made it, and
there
you were
still
in
are.
that thing. And if you didn't, you might have suffered the consequences and not had your career, and that sucks to me.
Getting some good Twitter feedback here. Top 5 list on Twitter writes in and says, Mickey Mantle did greenies, did uppers as a player. So what's the difference between him and Bonds? I mean, this is the
Well, first
moral
off, they
arguments
weren't-
we get into. That's a performance-enhancing drug.
Right.
Right? This was widely used in baseball in that era to get back up. Guys were doing amphetamines before games. I doubt it happens now because of the way they test. But this was just something that everyone did.
Things are
I'm not going
happening
to say
now.
everyone, but a lot of players did.
Things are definitely happening now. The chemists are always ahead. We know that. The chemists are always ahead. I know some guys that should be on more.
It should be a show mantra. The
Jacob
chemists are always
Swanson is
ahead.
always
Yes.
ahead. The chemist.
Jacob Swanson just gave a thumbs up to that. He's correct. The chemists are always ahead.
Is that one of my best ones for you, Jacob?
Confirmed.
There they are.
no.
They're the confirmation.
Jacob, if
hey,
he's writing down his favorite things I said, I just have a new number one.
Ty goes to the pharmacologist in baseball.
Jacob and Lance, they hung
They've
the
decorated.
OutKick 360.
Let's see you
sign.
again.
They've covered the hole in the wall.
It's very
There
shiny.
was an electrical outlet up there. Yeah, very well done.
Handiwork of one Christian Bly in Nebraska who sent that to us.
Yeah, we need to ask.
Chris.
He's a viewer.
We're not
of the
complaining because it's a very generous gift, but we need a little matte covering. Maybe it could.
Yeah, I don't think I'm not going to
Chad, your
crush him
thoughts?
for that because of the lighting that's right on top of it. I don't think he could have foresaw that being an issue when he made this, when he whittled this out of a single piece of
One
wood from
Chopped down the
Nantucket.
tree, dragged it into the wood shop.
Paul's next going
Good
to
as
talk about the amount of
handiwork.
lacquer on it and complain about that.
I don't know anything
It's a
about
fire
any of
hazard.
that. I was just thinking maybe he could give you a tip on what we could buy that you could then put an extra coat on.
You know, I'll put a
Chad,
call
that
in.
you could do
I'll
that.
put a
Well,
call
I'm not
in to
gonna-
see
I
if I can
hire
help you out
somebody
with
to do
that.
it.
Yeah, put something on it, some sort of lack of a sheen on top of it.
Right, just make it a little matte.
Yeah, I'll work on that.
Yeah, thanks. We appreciate it. For the good of the show.
Sure.
Or maybe we could wake up Danny. He could come in here and do that.
Danny.
Special Project Danny.
Paul, ready. Danny. He's up.
Does he wear headphones or does he just listen to ambient sound?
Headphones. Okay.
Is the volume up on those things or down?
Hopefully up for this venture, right?
We should take suggestions from Danny on what would keep him awake and just spend like 5 minutes every day. He just gives us a topic, and this is the segment that will keep Danny awake.
Well, look, we just got camera for Lance and Jacob. But we need Danny cam.
We need sleep cam. So we have
Slumber cam.
We have
love
Emma and Becca, and then there's Danny. And we were told that there was always a third. And we were like, "Tell us about Danny." We're like, "Well, he's asleep right now."
Yeah.
So
We're not talking like he hasn't gotten up yet for the day. We're talking like he's asleep at his desk.
It's very European. I mean, it's really just kind of a Spanish type flow of the
Siesta.
day, the
Yeah.
siesta. There's a late afternoon micro napping. Yesterday we got
These
into
are not
micro
mi-
dosing
These are macro.
with
I think.
accountants that Jacob knows. Now it's micro napping.
I think macro.
very European.
Yeah, I do. When it comes to sleep, I think macro also. In that I sleep at night,
Right.
and not
For a
during the day.
long segment of time.
Not a big napper.
Many things European that have made its way to the States. One of those is shaving your balls with Manscaped.
Danny, we'll be back in touch.
Manscaped.com,
Oh,
the
yes.
best in men's grooming. We showed you this yesterday. We're thrilled to have them on board. Proper grooming requires precision engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped, you have the right tools for the job. They obsess over providing you the best technology. And right now, a great offer, 20% off and free shipping for what you see on the screen with the code OK360 at manscaped.com. OK360 is the code for 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com. You can also order much more than what's in the box.
That's right. Like the crop mop ball wipe, the crop cleanser, the foot duster, and refined cologne. I'm looking at it right here.
The foot duster.
You know, Paul, you're a big fan of Europe.
I love it.
When you take something that's European and make it American, this is one of the best things that's come from Europe that's now in America. It's grooming. It's proper grooming habits. You can get all of that done.
And who would
with
have thought the
Manscaped.
Europeans would have been cutting edge on this sort of stuff? I didn't know that they led
Proper
the
hygiene.
charge on this, but you can groom. You know, you don't have to go straight there. You can start in other places.
No, you can go there. That's fine. It's
You go
good.
straight there.
Yeah.
With the Lawnmower 3.0, it comes with everything you need to keep it trimmed. A perfect package 3.0 kit. Manscaped.com. Chad's holding it up right now. This is
box is
exactly what
beautiful.
you would receive. Manscaped.com, and there's the code for 20% off and free shipping. OK360. Hang with us. Coming up, the most overhyped in the NFL draft. Next on OutKick 360. OutKick 360 across the OutKick network alongside Chad Withrow and Paul Koharski. I'm Jonathan Hutton. Crew making it happen for us. Coming up in about 30 minutes, we'll discuss Eddie George being announced as the new head coach at Tennessee State. Plus, we will chat with Gary Sheffield Jr. That's coming up in roughly 15 minutes as we get into the tweet that you and Paul, Chad, were argued about yesterday.
Yeah, Paul and I got into an argument, which prompted Paul to insult Gary Sheffield Jr. in his tweet.
Let's hope he's a little tougher than that.
And then he wanted to respond. We invited him on the show.
Good.
So we will have that discussion coming up about Ronald Acuna Jr. and what Gary Sheffield Jr. Tweeted about it. And looking forward to talking to him, an OutKick writer, and our first chance to have him on the show. So we'll talk a little baseball with Gary Sheffield Jr. coming up.
We invited him on the show without the typical consultation we have where the three of us agree on having a guest on the show. So I was informed that he was on the show on Twitter last night when we announced that we were having him on the show.
Did you have an issue with that?
I think that we should converse about guests on the show like we typically do, yes.
What we said yesterday, that we should have him on the show after we said that. And you nodded.
Typically we have a text chain that we talk about such matters.
Paul feels like he's being surprised on the show. Paul now can't handle himself.
Oh, I can handle myself
when
just fine.
surprised.
On tomorrow's show, Blaine Bishop will join us
Yeah.
live.
Literally, feel free to
I'll
book
take that
whoever
one.
you guys want. If I come on and insult someone and you want to bring them on the show, you guys go ahead and do that behind my back and announce it on Twitter. I'm fine with it. I'll go ahead and put that out there. Because I'm a big boy.
I'm a big boy too. Let's
Okay,
go.
we'll find out.
Here's who we're not buying, and something we did discuss yesterday, who we're not buying in the NFL draft. We're going to pick an individual player and tell you why we think they're being overhyped at this point, as we are now about 2 weeks away from draft night. And it immediately, for me, at the top end of the pass rush category, if we were to rewind to last year, Gregory Rousseau from Miami would have been that player at the top. Edge rusher for Miami. You see the measurables. A wide receiver in high school, and now he's the best pass rusher in this draft. You see the numbers, but may I also remind you, 15 career games and 7 starts. So 15 and a half sacks stands out in 15 games. A lot of this are the clear view sacks is how I would describe it. It's not hard to watch a highlight reel of Gregory Rousseau and see most of the games played when he started in 7 of them. And a lot of that is Manny Diaz rushing up the middle. How much of that and how often is that happening next season at the NFL level? They don't have a ton of tape on him. I'm not saying he's not a top 30 type player. I think he's a first round pick, but elite top 10 guy, I'm not buying it as a guy that I've just got to have, that I'm jumping on the table for. I think he's overhyped.
I like your argument. I think something that's going to crop up here a lot, Hut, are these small sample size guys that haven't had a ton of starts and haven't had a lot of play. You factor in now some other guys who opted out.
He's one of them.
Yeah, and there are more, right? So you haven't seen the continued development. So you're not only projecting them into the league, but you're projecting what they would have done in their final year in college ball. That creates dangerous territory. Now you look at them, and some of these scouts and personnel evaluators get stars in their eyes because they see the length.
Yeah.
Oh, the length. Look at the body type. All of that, those sorts of things. But I think you make a good argument as to why he's somebody that a first rounder, yes, but I can see why you aren't buying what people are going.
I think there is a massive gap between the boom and bust probability here for Gregory Rousseau. He could be elite, but the floor is very low for him, as I try to pinpoint exactly why I wouldn't be jumping on the table saying, this is a player, this is a dude I've got to have on my team.
I have a hard time trusting a guy who treated a pandemic like a break. And that, to me, is exactly what Rousseau did. Hey, I had a great season before. I've got these tangibles
He's
about
a redshirt
me.
sophomore.
I've got these stats, and now I can just sit out and get ready for the NFL draft. Now, some would say, well, you're criticizing a guy for making a business decision about his future and everything else, and that's fine. But he can make his business decision.
And he's not the only
but
one
if
who
I'm
did
a
that.
team, I cannot trust him also because he decided and elected to not play football. and he treated a pandemic like it was a break for him and treated it like a business decision. I've got a hard time trusting a high first-round pick on a guy that does that. That's my personal preference. So for that reason, I agree with you.
I'm a little more forgiving, unsurprisingly, on the pandemic stuff. I don't know specifics of his case. I know there are some guys who sat out, who's, needed to spend time with their grandmother, for example, who is more susceptible to COVID and, had, to me, legitimate concerns for those causes. And so it's more of a personal decision than a business decision for some of those. But the small sample size is definitely a concern. I want to see the guy play. And so I don't think it's unfair that he then, fall in the draft as a consequence of not having a big sample size. That's not unfair. That's just a consequence that goes with playing fewer games.
Only one player in college football in Division I had more sacks than Gregory Rousseau in 2019. Chase Young. And Rousseau did it again in 7 starts and 15 games total. I believe he played in 2 his freshman year and then 13 in year number 2. And when mocks come out, there's the extreme mock draft that comes out for the following year, the day after the draft concludes. Rousseau's a top 5 pick in those mocks if you go back a year, right as the pandemic starts.
But you're saying clear vision, so you're seeing cleanups.
Clear view. No, he's coming clear view to the quarterback.
Oh,
that's not happening at the NFL level.
Yeah, he's getting blocked. He's going to have to beat somebody.
Chad, who are you going with?
So I'm never going to be less popular with the Mormon community than I will be right now because I am going with BYU's Zach Wilson, the quarterback. I'm not a believer in Wilson. And maybe I'm allowing the fact that the Jets are so interested in him to cloud my judgment on him.
New regime.
But I've never been – I think he's a good player. His numbers, as you see, speak for themselves. 33 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, over 3,600 yards. He's not small. He's a guy that you look at his face and you think he's small, and he's not that small of a player. I think his NFL height is 6'2", 210, 6'3", 214 listed at BYU. The shoulder injury worries me. The fact that he's had a recurring shoulder problem that had to be cleaned up. It's a throwing shoulder issue. The competition worries me a bit with Zach Wilson. I'm just, when you stack him up against some of these other quarterbacks, and take Trevor Lawrence out of it, who is the clear-cut, the prospect, the guy, best prospect at quarterback since Andrew Luck. I'm not believing in Zach Wilson over Justin Fields, over Trey Lance. I'm not believing in Zach Wilson over Mac Jones necessarily either. I'm just not a believer. I think of the quarterbacks that are going to be first-round picks in this draft, if you talked about Hutton, you mentioned low floor, high ceiling. I think the Zach Wilson ceiling is pretty low, and I think the floor is even lower. So I don't think there's a ton of potential for greatness with Zach Wilson. I think that at his best, he is a steady, middle-of-the-pack NFL starting quarterback, right around 15, 16 if you're ranking. And I think at his worst, he's not a New York Jet within 2 or 3 years.
Here's the thing about that steady, middle-of-the-pack quarterback, and I'm going to get into this on my own pick. They've become, I'm with you, I'm surprised how valuable that's become. You'll go get that guy at number 2 now to have the 15th best quarterback in the league. And I still feel old schoolish, like if I'm picking a quarterback at number 2, I want him to be pretty damn spectacular. But that's not the way the league's working right now. Like if you can get a guy who's going to give you 4 years of starting at least and be the 15th quarterback in the league, do you want better? Yes. Do you feel like you should be able to win if you have that steady quarterback play and you can build a different kind of team around him where you run and play defense and find some playmakers for him and can play to his strengths and not lose? That's not the favored way to go about it, but that's a way to go about it if you can't find that other guy. And you have to take that guy, unfortunately, now in the league at 2.
Well, and it's, to your point, Paul, is the demand great or is the player great or the prospect great?
The demand.
And I think so often with NFL teams, the demand is so great, it forces you to reach on a player who isn't top 5 level. at quarterback just because of the position he plays. I'm not saying this for Zach Wilson because he's going to go second overall and there's a lot of good quarterbacks behind him. So it doesn't necessarily pertain to him, but if I'm ranking these quarterbacks in order, I'm putting Zach Wilson last in that group. I'm putting him probably even with Mac Jones at that level. I'm not putting him second overall.
I like the pros for me with Zach Wilson. You can see your offense. I think you can see, if you're drafting high, you can see your offense in the style of play that Zach Wilson is capable of running. Because at BYU, there's a lot of RPO base.
Off-platform.
And they run anything you can, a little bit of everything at BYU within that offense. My question for him is, are you going to be able to relatively quickly get him to take the easy throw over the most difficult thing out there? I mean, what I see whenever you can watch just a full game of highlights from Zach Wilson is bombs away. I mean, they are letting it rip, and that's a lot of fun. But you can force a football too as a rookie and look really bad doing it. So that's the next question: is how much can he form to what and fit the mold of what they're going to be doing in New York?
He's got some bad Baker Mayfield to him.
Maybe
in his game. When you think of bad Baker Mayfield, when he's trying to force it, when he's trying to let it rip too much, Wilson's got some of that to his game.
And I still, look, I love the Josh Allen story, right? I hope it pans out for Trey Lance. And I know BYU's a different deal than that, a better deal. But you mentioned the competition, and I wonder about that. I think we're getting to a point where people are worrying about that less and less. But we're due for one of those guys to not hit it. So.
Well, that's an understatement. I mean, I would say the majority of these guys are not going to hit it.
No, I know. But I feel like right now we're at a point where
odds tell us that.
Yeah, but right now we're at a point where teams are less concerned with the competition you've played against and more judging. We're trending towards judging you on your play and not downgrading you for who you played against, thinking it'll translate. And we've seen some guys do that well. So I'm saying in that subset, I'm thinking we're due for a guy.
Let's continue with him just for a brief moment here, because we are looking at this through the lens of the New York Jets.
Yeah.
Put him with Kyle Shanahan, and how do you feel about Zach Wilson?
A lot better. A lot better. And I said that to begin. That he's the name that immediately jumps to mind when we started talking about this exercise. But some of that is because it's the New York Jets that are so in love with him.
Well, I will say
him second.
I will say two things about the Jets. New regime, though every new regime, look, that hasn't meant much in the past because the new regimes have been worse than the previous regime. Though it's hard to be worse than Adam Gase, I think. Also, this is their own pick. You know, they didn't sacrifice the house to go get this. They've got other good picks to help him out. So
I would say the same about Arthur Smith. If it was Arthur Smith and the Falcons that were in love with Zach Wilson, I'd probably have a slightly different perspective on the pick and him as a prospect.
And I'm forgetting who the Jets hired as offensive coordinator, but there's a defensive head coach. So there's a
Robert
Shanahan
Saleh's
tree.
their head coach.
It's a Shanahan head tree guy.
Matt LaFleur's brother is the offensive coordinator for the New York Jets. Paul.
I didn't want to go quarterback. And I was looking hard for somebody not to be quarterback, but boom, I landed on another quarterback, Mac Jones. And people will see my anti-Alabama bias here, but I've got a better case than that. And look, I understand that I hit on it there with the Wilson conversation, this urge to go get the quarterback, even if he's the 15th best quarterback, right? We covered that. But if he's the pick at number 3 and San Francisco gave up number 12, a third, a 2022 first, a 2023 first, I need a dynamic, electric franchise changer. I don't need the 15th best quarterback in the league. So to me, Chad, it goes further than yours. I hit on it there. At least the Jets have the second overall pick from being a crappy team. They didn't give up the house to go get Zach Wilson. I just listed what they've given up, the 49ers, if this is their pick. They've given up a ton. So you're giving up a ton to go get Mac Jones? There are qualities that Mac Jones has that are very favorable qualities. He's a good decision maker. He's an accurate quarterback. he's showed well against pressure with people coming at him. I was watching some of this more intently last night. I was very impressed against heavy pressure. But he's got the best offensive line in the country. He's got two of the very best weapons in the country. Where more than at Alabama are you going to have perfect situations to play quarterback? And what doesn't happen in the NFL? You very rarely have a perfect situation. You're not going to have, I can't tell you right now San Francisco's receivers. I can tell you who left. Kendrick Bourne left. George Kittle's a fantastic player when he's healthy, we know. That system doesn't call for the most difficult throws in the world. So can he be good there? Yes. But he's not explosive. He's not dynamic. He's mobile enough to shift around. We've talked about this and get himself out of trouble and make the move that buys you a second to make a throw. But he's not going to make the run plays that have become more and more part of the game that a Ryan Tannehill can make to buy you a first down or score you a touchdown when coverage is.
We can mention another quarterback that would be
open.
There also, Justin Fields.
Right.
Plays that he could make with his legs.
And he's had all these superb things going around him with elite skill players, an elite play caller, you can argue, in Sark, and he's only had 17 starts too. So we're touching on the sample size thing that you had. So phenomenal statistics, 41 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 4,500 yards. That's the kind of quarterback I've been asking for, by the way, at Alabama, a pro-style guy. So I'm acknowledging that collegiately that's what I've wanted. But Dane Brugler, who we had on recently, what does he say about him? High floor. And what do I want out of the third pick in the draft? I'm not excited about high floor. I want high ceiling. And so again, give me explosive, give me dynamic. It's not so much, and so I think he's being hyped in a way that doesn't suit what I'm talking about. At least if he's sold accurately, I could buy it. But I think people are giving him too much upside.
I can't buy the lack of starts at the quarterback position whenever we're touting Trey Lance. We didn't even mention Trey Lance in this discussion, and the guy played in one game last year.
Oh, yeah. No, I got the same issues.
I would say
with
the
Trey
same
Lance.
for, if you're looking at quality start. Joe Burrow had one great season. Yeah. Mac Jones had one great season.
That's
but
fair.
again, I'll compare the two and say, who you buying? Joe Burrow and his ability or Mac Jones and his ability based on two great statistical seasons. Two of the best all time.
Mac Jones could have come back the same way Joe Burrow did. How would we be talking if Mac Jones is coming back for another year at Alabama?
If Joe
He's going on the tour that Burrow went on.
Yeah,
if Joe Burrow had the same offensive infrastructure the year before and had two seasons like that, what would it look like? And yeah, Mac Jones would have done the exact same thing probably. Even losing Waddle and Devontae Smith, they still would have been great offensively and he'd put up terrific numbers.
So we're going with Gregory Rousseau, Zach Wilson, and Mac Jones individually as some overrated players. And look, there are others that were certainly candidates for this. For players who opted out, there are several in the first round that you can point to that we didn't see play. We haven't seen play in a year and a half. On top of that, a lot of guys in scouting departments and coaches and GMs are going to point to, man, I would love to see this guy, especially at the quarterback spot, throw at the combine. Let's see the velocity of their arm speed, football speed. Not going to have that.
I do give credit. Some of them are having like double pro days, so Fields will have been seen twice.
Yep. I think Lance too.
Lance, I think, have been seen twice. So that's smart to help you. The more you can be seen, the better. There's nothing to hide from. A lot of these guys don't work out at pro days after they're seen at the combine. This is a whole different venue now.
OutKick's Gary Sheffield Jr. about to join us, and then in 15 minutes we discuss Eddie George and the opening presser that took place this morning here in Nashville as he is the new head coach of the TSU Tigers. More coming on OutKick 360. Hang with us. FanDuel.com/OK360 is the website for some great odds. New users, $1,000 risk-free bet up to $1,000. If you're a new user, you can opt in there at FanDuel.com/OK360. You could be like Chad. You can opt in on the Braves anytime they're playing. And we all opt in on Ronald Acuna and the style of play that he brings both in the field and at bat on the base paths. And Chad, that brings us to our next guest, Gary Sheffield Jr., with a tweet that he sent out yesterday.
Yeah, Gary Sheffield Jr., I really enjoy his coverage, OutKick.com, covering baseball and basketball. Our first chance to talk to Gary Sheffield Jr. And Gary, we'll start with this because I enjoyed the tweet and actually sent this on to the group, and Paul took issue with it. So we'll let you explain and talk about this. Ronald Acuna Jr. setting the tone for a World Series run starts with your best player doing things like this, and it's a video of him legging out a routine ground ball to short to start the game against the Phillies. This obviously caught your eye when you saw it.
Yeah, and you being a Braves fan, you know how close the Braves are to winning a World Series. I think we all can agree that the Braves are probably not the best team in the National League. Everybody thinks the Dodgers, I feel like we would all agree, the Dodgers are probably going to win the World Series if everything goes as planned. But when your best player isn't running out ground balls and they're not showing you that winning is the most important thing, because we have to keep in mind, Ronald Acuna just signed a big contract. I know he was underpaid in most people's eyes, but we're still talking generational wealth. He doesn't need to run out a ground ball. And that's the thing that's most important, is that if guys don't have to do something, a lot of times you'll see that they don't do it. So I was really impressed that Ronald Acuna was able to show the team really that he's able to put winning first. And when it comes down to it at the end of the season, if a role player is dogging it, Ronald Acuna now can go in his bag and say, hey, I demand more of you because I can do more. So I'm hoping that this could maybe narrow the gap between the Braves and the Dodgers, but we'll see.
And one thing that Paul said to this, which I agree with, is the baseline should be trying hard and effort. But yeah, you mentioned this, Gary, that's not always the case. And we all sat here on this panel yesterday and agreed that we see it all the time in Major League Baseball where guys are dogging it and guys aren't running hard to first. And this is something I appreciate about Acuna, a true five-tool player that's always hustling to this level.
This is not just with athletes, though. Everybody will tell you they work hard at their job every single day. I give it my absolute best. But how true is that really? How often do people really give their 100% every single day? Most of the times you pick your spots, and at the very least you want to make sure that everyone believes that you're a hard worker, and that's fine. But every single day you're not going to give it 100%, and athletes are always going to tell you, I run hard all the time. It's not ever true, other than maybe Pete Rose. He's probably the only guy who was doing that. So I want to be clear. I don't want to give Ronald Acuna applause for running hard, but I do want to point out how important it is.
You don't want to give him applause for running hard, but you just did.
No, I want to give him credit for the impact. That's about it.
Well, I'm fascinated, the two of you, in your big fandom of Ronald Acuna, as you've given him a parade for this effort. You, Gary, have been on Twitter since 2011. So I went and looked back at 2019. I didn't see a word about Acuna when he was benched for not running hard against the Dodgers, when he presumed he had a home run and he turned a double into a single. And then when he did the same thing in a playoff game against the Cardinals. Chad yesterday given a chance to applaud the Braves' best player, who made a phenomenal play beating this out. Didn't recollect that Acuna used to be a dog, that this was a big issue for the Braves. That's all water under the bridge now. The guy ran hard to first base, and we're going to throw him a parade. He's improved, and that's a good thing. But now we're acting like this guy is an all-out hustler all the time.
To be clear, though, Paul, you're talking about a season he almost had a 40-40 season and became the fifth player in Major League Baseball history in 2019.
But does that mean that he did not turn these two home runs
we say
into
this all
doubles?
the time. This is one of our arguments. Things can change.
Right.
You have a bit of info, and you think one thing about a player, and then things change, and when that changes, you're allowed to change your opinion.
But you're so fanish on the guy, you lent no context to his improvement the other day. You strictly talked about that. You didn't say he used to be a dog and now he's running hard. You were just like, wow, look how hard he ran. That's terrific.
Gary, we'll let you respond.
I thought the play was incredible.
It was.
I had no idea I didn't think he was going to be safe. I've watched the replay 10 times. I still can't believe he was safe. I personally didn't believe Didi Gregorius was really dogging it that hard, taking his time. He made a strong throw over there. So it was, I mean, he was booking to get to first base there. So I was impressed by that. And just because I'm impressed by a play and by how hard a guy worked on a particular play doesn't mean I'm giving him a pass for what he did in the postseason, because he deserves to be killed for that. He cannot let that happen. And that's something that needs to be recognized. But I also was happy to see the best player for a team working that hard.
I mean, the other underlying stat to all of this, and you mentioned Gregorius and the throw. I didn't realize they're keeping up with these numbers. I guess I should have. It's the fastest throw on a grounder that Gregorius has made since 2016 to first base at 88 miles per hour. I don't know how they track this on every single grounder and how they immediately pick that up, but that makes Acuna's run and to be able to beat the fastest throw that Gregorius has made since 2016. That's even more impressive to me, that they back it up on the fact that the shortstop, had what was a great throw to first for his standards and what they've measured in the past 5 years.
Yeah, and I saw online everyone was talking about knowing your runner and knowing your runner. Well, if you know your runner, and like Paul said, he has a history. I mean, he has a murky history with running down the first base line. Well, if knowing your runner is Ronald Acuna, wouldn't you feel that your hardest throw since 2016 or whenever it was going to be enough to get him out? You would think so. But I do believe that people sometimes can work at a certain job or in any given year, they could give less than their best, and they can show up the following year. They deserve to be crushed for what they did. And then when you show up and actually get your best, you have to give him credit when it's due. And I don't want to say that he deserves a Nobel Peace Prize, because he doesn't. But he and I agree with Paul there. It's not like I'm going to sit here and act like, well, the Braves are going to win the World Series because he ran down the first base line. No, what I'm saying is baseball is a game where it's a game of inches. One bad play, one guy running hard could affect one game in the series, change home field, and potentially win the Braves the pennant.
Well, so who can we now watch on this Braves lineup to see an impact of Acuna and the hustle play? Like, who are the dogs on this roster that should now get a pick-me-up for Acuna's hustle?
To me, that's Ozzie Albies. He's like the little brother to me, he's the little brother of Ronald Acuna. And you're going to be seeing names that you haven't heard of on this Braves roster that now Ronald Acuna can look at and say, I need more from you. Potentially one guy might run harder on a ground ball, one person, because of what Ronald Acuna did. Because, okay, if that guy he's locked up, generational wealth, nothing can happen to him. And I don't have that. Well, if he can run hard, maybe I can run hard on a given play, and that affects the season. You never know. So that's potentially what Ronald Acuna was doing.
Gary Sheffield Jr. from OutKick with us. What are you liking in the AL? What's caught your eye in this small sample size so far?
Well, what I'm noticing is that Houston's good again. And I wasn't expecting, obviously, Oakland to come off to such a slow start. It is early. But the American League is wide open. I feel like there's 4 or 5 teams that can really come out of this league. The league is not very good. You're obviously seeing the Padres and the Dodgers just killing things right now. So you're going to start seeing the trade market really heat up in the American League. You're going to potentially start seeing a trade with Luis Castillo in New York. The Yankees are probably going to have to go get another starter, and things are going to get interesting. So right now, what's most compelling about the AL is that no one's really that compelling.
How bad of a look is it for baseball, Gary, when you see the situation at the end of the Mets-Marlins game with a strike hitting the batter and ending the game, and then the end of the Phillies-Braves game on Sunday night on ESPN Sunday Night Baseball with another controversial ending? Oh, by the way, happened to take place in the same division.
Well, old school baseball fans will tell you that's the beauty of baseball, right? The human element, the human error, that's what makes this game beautiful. But the problem is with technology, and we want to get everything right now. So it's not really that enjoyable to watch a guy win a baseball game after getting hit. Yeah, you have to give the guy, I guess, somewhat credit for getting in the way of the baseball. I mean, he said it was his natural instinct. But that's, to me, that's not sport. When something is literally in the strike zone, it's like a guy going in the end zone and somehow, some way, he doesn't get a touchdown. Well, there's going to be a problem there, and hopefully nothing like this happens in a postseason game. but we've already seen it happen before.
Gary Sheffield Jr. has been our guest. Appreciate the time, man. And we would tell everyone, go follow Gary on Twitter at Gary Sheffield Jr. Read his work at OutKick.com. Let's let this be the first of several visits down the road, please.
Nice to meet you.
I appreciate it, guys. And Paul, don't forget to give me a follow, buddy.
All right.
Gary Sheffield Jr.
Gotcha,
has
man.
been our guest. Great to have him on, and we'll be talking some baseball with him down the road for sure. And to see the video, if you haven't seen Acuna beat out the throw, it is quite the athletic feat.
Yeah, another nice tag up last night, right?
Well, it's here's what's impressive to me about Ronald Acuna. He's got a chance to be in the 40-40 club and be the 5th player all time to do that. Alfonso Soriano in 2006 with the Nationals was the last guy to do it. A-Rod, Barry Bonds, Jose Canseco are the only 4 players to do it. And I love the guy because he can do everything. That's why I love him. I mean, and you're right, he has been a dog at times in his career before, but if he plays at this level, and he's on a tear right now, but if he can get to that 40-40 mark, that would be something.
One thing about the 40-40 mark, not dismissing that it'd be a big deal for him, there are a lot of guys from one era that didn't realize that 40 stolen bases was going to go down as a big mark. I can't remember who I heard say it, who said, if I realized 40-40 was going to be a big deal, I would have stolen more bases. Because there have been several dry eras of stealing bases. So I need to look back statistically at who some of those guys were. Not that it's not an impressive feat or an impressive list.
I'd like to hear from the guys that just decided not to steal more bases because they didn't know 40 was the mark.
Well, there are
I
plenty
think
of-
the goal is to steal as many bases as possible if you can do it.
That's not true at all in the American League. Plenty of teams don't believe in stealing bases at all for lots of times because they believe in getting people on bases and doing something they do in the American League called hitting home runs.
Then if that's the case, then the 40-40 mark doesn't matter anyway if they don't believe in stealing more bases because they're in the American League.
Well, a lot of teams in the American League when I was growing up didn't steal bases. They got people on base.
Jose
and tried to
Canseco,
hit
A-Rod, half of them are in the American League that are in the 40-40 club. It's impressive.
Earl Weaver, manager of your Orioles, was not a guy who sent runners to steal bases because he expected
Shame on
people
him.
to hit home runs.
Shame on Earl Weaver.
No. Hutton's got to look at with a black eye on the history of his
If you have a
franchise.
talent that's capable of stealing a base, I want him to steal the bag.
And the alternative to hitting these home runs, by the way, is bunting people over, which I understand the Braves did very well last
I
night.
mean, I'm about chatting with Bo Jackson this week. You're telling me that they shouldn't send him to steal a bag if you have the talent that he possesses because he plays in a certain league?
Well, I'm telling you, if the guy behind
Because the
him,
manager doesn't believe in it?
if the objective of the guy behind him is to hit a home run, then the odds of him getting thrown out take you out of an inning where you're built to hit home runs behind him was a strategic thing at stages of AL play.
So should you say the National League players can't hit home runs like American League players can? So
No, now
should we
it's
not
not.
care about National League players in the past because it wasn't their strategy to hit home runs? So 40 home runs isn't a big mark because it wasn't their strategy?
Now,
The 40-40 list is impressive.
Yes, there's only 4 players who have done it.
I don't understand why you refuse to acknowledge that I said it's
We're
impressive.
downplaying it because the AL doesn't put an
I
emphasis
said
on
it's
stolen
impressive,
bags.
but I said there are eras where a lot of AL teams weren't looking to steal bases.
Well, there are eras
Mickey
where
Mantle could have stolen a lot more bases.
Well, there's
than
an
he
era where
stole.
Cy Young pitched every game, and the amount of wins mattered more than it does now. There are
absolutely.
eras where strikeouts mattered, and no one cares if you strike out now, if you hit a home run every now and again. So, I mean,
gonna go
we
look
could
for
play
this
that game
quote.
all day.
Gonna
Bottom
go look
line
for
is, throughout the history of baseball, hitting a home run and stealing a base are both positives and smiled upon by the game. I don't know any era where it hasn't been.
Well, now it's strikeout or walk.
Strike out and hit a home run.
Or home run.
Yeah. I mean,
Or-
the Braves strike out more than I hate it. I'm a contact
Well,
guy.
no.
I'm going to put it in play, and
There are
the
a lot of-
Braves strike out as much as any team in baseball. So I'm not a big fan of it.
Coming up, Eddie George is the new head coach at TSU. Our thoughts on his opening press conference. Should we tease this by saying it lived up to expectations of number 27 and the leader that we have become familiar with here?
Yeah, I don't know that anybody will be,
I don't know
will
how
be
else to describe
surprised, but the bullet points that we'll
The
give
bullet
you,
points
you
are-
will love.
Yes, that's next on OutKick 360. OutKick 360 and Chat Roulette here on the Tennessee Power Hour, alongside Chad Withrow
It's
and
all
Paul
here.
Koharski. I'm Jonathan,
Right
discussing
here.
during the break
Right here.
the trolling on the YouTube chat, which never ends, and we appreciate that follow, that like, that subscription, wherever you may be watching. You
need
can
more
subscribe
trolls.
to the channel. You can retweet the link through Twitter at OutKick 360. You can also find us on Facebook Live, and you can download the podcast wherever you listen to your podcast, available daily as soon as the show ends.
Just a brief message to David, formerly of our YouTube chat, that would comment on our fashion every day. Please come back to us. Wherever you went. I know you're watching, but you're not
Is he?
commenting.
He's watching.
We need you to comment on what you think of our appearance. Please do so. It's great show fodder.
You were a character
We
on the show.
appreciate it, and we want you to return. Come back to us. Please come back to us. Thank you.
We miss you.
Eddie George, officially named the
Word.
TSU head coach today in a press conference that took place over on the campus in the Gentry Center. First off, congratulations to Eddie. You could see the passion and the enthusiasm for the position that he's taking. They made it clear that Rod Reed was told about this decision 6 weeks ago, so a month and a half ago, which goes in line with what we said yesterday on the show, with how much that Eddie had been thinking about this behind the scenes prior to taking on the role of head coach. Full coaching staff was not disclosed, was not discussed at the presser that lasted roughly 27 minutes.
Question should have been asked and wasn't.
Yes, but what he was asked was why you wanted the job and why he's the right man for the job. And the leadership qualities of Eddie in front of that room are exactly why TSU and the decision makers picked up the phone and called him. And the commitment and the intent of the position, that's why Eddie took the job. You can tell he is eager to help mold that football team into a winner.
He said some very interesting things. He certainly talked about his full commitment. The thing that struck me the most about after he took the initial phone call and subsequent phone calls, it just resonated in my spirit and it wouldn't go away. So they rung a bell with him, and the echo of that bell wouldn't go away. They struck a chord, and I don't want to say they lucked out. They were wise to go to him and try. We always say this. Why not go to the guy on the top of your list and see, right? Chad says this all the time. You know, don't presume you can't get the top guy on your list. Well, he's talking about, basketball coaches who have good jobs. Well, see if he'll leave.
If they say no, big deal.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Then you go to the next guy. And we all know the story of how low-ranking Roy Williams was for Kansas.
Yeah.
When he got the Kansas job, and it turned out to be an unbelievably good hire. So if you think,
a good
hey,
point.
Eddie George as a leader of men doesn't have coaching experience, but in exchange for not having coaching experience, we know we're going to get a great leader of men, an organized guy with a great sensibility who will teach himself how to coach and surround himself with good coaches. That's the guy we want. They did a good job with that, and he was terrific today.
Well, when was the last time that TSU had that sort of attendance for a press conference, or that many eyeballs watching a press conference? Maybe never. So that's the big draw to it. And people say, well, who cares about winning the press conference if you don't win on the field? Well, it matters at a place like TSU where you got to raise money, where you need an investment from your people, from your alum, from the city of Nashville, and that's what Eddie George can get. And so much about being a great leader and so much of leadership is great communication and being a great communicator. So I have no idea what system Eddie wants to run, how he's going to handle fourth down, how he's going to handle different late game situations. Don't know any of that.
And he said he doesn't know any of that
No,
yet.
and no one does. But here's what I know about Eddie George. He is a great communicator. We had him on our old show for a player show. He is a terrific communicator. He will bring people together. He will clearly communicate the goals for that program, what he wants to accomplish. What you saw today in that press conference is simply a precursor to how he's going to communicate to the TSU and greater Nashville community. For that reason, I think he's going to be a success.
dynamic, energetic, charismatic. That's how you would describe Eddie George. And TSU described the hire as bold and strategic.
And a transformational impact, Mickey Allen said, not only for football, for the university at large and for the Nashville community. And that's what a school like that is striving for every time, and you hope you're getting it with an alumni like Rod Reed. But Rod Reed's, this is no offense to Rod Reed, and they were very kind to Rod Reed in what they said. But Rod Reed's reach is limited, and Rod Reed's reach is predominantly within the people you have already.
Sure.
He's a Tiger. He's a TSU guy, and so he can do well to reach TSU people. But TSU and schools like TSU need, ideally, to be able to reach beyond the fences of their campus.
Yeah, and that's what John Merritt was known for doing in the fundraising department at Tennessee State University. And in regards to the strategic element of this, Chad, where would you rank TSU today among in-state OVC football programs? Today. Immediately.
Number one. And there's not a close second.
He's a magnet.
I would say when Will Healy was at Austin Peay,
yep,
and the buzz he created would have been right up there with them. But now that Will Healy's gone, now that they've had another coach leave also, it's not even close. I mean, I'm going through the list now.
Tech's been playing some winning football.
UT Martin, Tennessee Tech.
Right.
It's TSU. It's Eddie George.
There's
and
a
TSU.
draw.
And you brought up this point. Where would you put in terms of the pecking order of just interest?
Mm-hmm.
They play in two different divisions, but MTSU versus TSU.
TSU has more interest right now.
Yep.
That's just the brutal honesty of the two programs by making one hire.
It's your move, Middle. And it's your
Yeah.
move, all of these schools in the OVC.
Bold and strategic is what I wish, for every program except for the Tennessee Vols in state. Like that should be the bold and strategic motive of how do you attack the in-state recruiting? How do you get the Middle Tennessee fan, I'm talking about the region, not the school, the Middle Tennessee football fan to go to your game over going to Vanderbilt or over going to MTSU or going to Clarksville just to watch a game with your son or daughter or just a family outing in Clarksville or whatever it might be. What's going to get you out to a football game or just to get you to donate to a program for the first time in years if you're an alum or if you're just a supporter of HBCUs or whatever it might be. This is an element of that's going to help in that area that they didn't have.
Marketing,
and that quite frankly, the other schools don't have that much either.
No.
Well, so it's also this is what's interesting to me about the hire and who made the hire. Dr. Mickey Allen played at Brentwood Academy locally, played at the University of Tennessee, won a national championship there, 4-year letterman at Tennessee. A football guy, right? A former football player who was a national championship winning football player at Tennessee. You would think a hire like this would be made by a marketing person. So this shows me also that Mickey Allen is marrying the two, right? He is a football player. That's his background. He's not, it doesn't come from the marketing, strategic planning type background, but he sees the marketing opportunities, promotional opportunities with Eddie George, and he's marrying that with football and what can be done in football, but also the common sense approach of what's going to make us money and what's going to drive revenue, what's going to bring in donations, and that's Eddie George. I just think it's, when you see this, you would think, oh, this is some marketer that is a big promotions person.
Not a football person.
Yeah, that's not a sports person.
Which would be critical of in a lot of
situations. A fundraiser. This would be made by a fundraiser as an AD, not a guy who played football at Tennessee and won a national championship. So I just find that dynamic interesting of who his boss is at TSU.
In a lot of cases, I'd call this a gimmick. I think it's a gimmick with Deion Sanders. I don't think Deion Sanders will ultimately put in the work. Why? Because I saw Deion Sanders go into television, and what did he do? He did not put in the work. He didn't know who the all-pro safety was. Kevin Byard. How to pronounce his, not just how to pronounce his name, but who he was.
Well, that's being unfair to Deion Sanders, to be fair, to the argument. Because he has put in the work behind the scenes coaching. I mentioned that yesterday. There were signs that Deion wanted to coach a lot more than Eddie George ever wanted.
Well,
to
and I
coach.
think
He's put in the work
okay.
in that area with the youth.
I will say this though: Deion Sanders at Florida State when that was rumored, it was ridiculous.
Right, you don't.
Deion
start
Sanders at Jackson State when they made that move, I thought, okay, smart move by Jackson State,
Right.
because now
Right.
I'm suddenly watching ESPN Plus on Saturdays in the spring to catch a quarter of Deion Sanders' game for Jackson
Well,
State.
Deion Sanders gets a chance, but Deion Sanders, to me, is a showman who wants to be the guy leading the three-ring circus, and where he is, you don't get that. Ultimately, the lights go out, and you have to do some grinding behind the scenes.
And they're about
and
a
we'll
500
see if he
team.
does it or
They're a
not.
500 team in the spring.
Right, and it's early. It's his
And-
first year, and he's got to recruit and do all that.
And he put Jackson State on the map.
Sure.
Where every week, now granted, this is in the spring.
And first
Now,
time.
But I'm saying the spring for the TV contract. ESPN had a deal where they only showed his games every week.
Right.
Every single week, he was on national television.
I'm not disagreeing with you about his interest in coaching and all of that. In terms
Well, you said
of,
he wasn't putting in the work.
In
I mean-
terms of,
well, he wasn't putting in the work on NFL Network.
in
is what you
terms
said.
of personal work ethic post career. I see that Eddie George has worked at a lot of
Yes,
things and been a successful
absolutely.
businessman.
Eddie George hasn't
I have not
half-assed
yet
anything.
seen it from Deion, and so I'll be curious to see it. Because still, off of Deion Sanders, what's the biggest story, Ben? There's some kind of weird. There's always something weird going on around Deion. There's never anything weird going on around Eddie.
Now,
There's a
Paul,
there's a different approach for sure.
That-
here's
that's
and
that's
to your
where I was
point,
headed.
Paul, it's fair to say Deion Sanders half-assed the TV gig, right? And he may have been passionate about the coaching on the side with youth football and everything that he did, and he may be
busy being
passionate at Jackson
passionate about
State.
that, and
But it
while
is
he was
fair to
half-assed
question a
the
guy
TV.
who we know didn't put in the work on the television side. The difference with Eddie is he puts in the work with everything he does. Now, I do think it's fair to question Eddie George, self-proclaimed, and honestly he is, a Renaissance man. You look at head coaches in college football, not a lot of Renaissance men.
No.
These are football
Singular.
dudes. These are all the time, all day, thinking about it, working it, on the phone, texting recruits, in the office, working on it. These are football people. So I do think it's not his work ethic that you could ever question with Eddie George. It's not his ability as a communicator. It's not his ability as a salesman. But I would say that I think it's fair if someone throws out the question, is Eddie George really going to be committed solely to this and not the hundreds of other things that Eddie George is interested in? To put in the time that it takes to be a successful head football coach in college, you're going to have to take away from a lot of other things that interest him.
And that was my question right out of the gate. And
It's
he
a fair
said he
question.
would be, and all we could do is take him at face
Right.
value and watch. He said, I've been a mentor my whole life. Elements of everything that I've done have prepared me for this. Every aspect of the opportunity, it's the nuances of it where the learning is going to come. And I asked for your patience on that. And he talked about, do I call the timeout? Do I go for it on fourth down? All of those things. He's got to learn. And the thing he has going for him is that he's an incredibly bright guy who's learned a lot of things. He learned how to build a financial business. He learned how to be, a guy in a tequila business. He learned how, all these. He learned how to be an actor who we saw at Belmont, who went all the way to being in a prominent role in Chicago on Broadway. It doesn't get bigger than that.
But let me jump in. To go back to, and this ties in with the coaching aspect. And I said this yesterday, he knows what he doesn't know. I've had a glimpse of what it's like behind the scenes with Eddie and some of his business acumen. He surrounds himself with some really intelligent people, and he does that on purpose, where he's open to ideas, he's open to suggestions on how to execute certain things, how to properly go about a path and a business model. And he's also smart in the fact of what he turns down and what he decides not to do in the business world. I guess what I'm trying to get at is he didn't just wake up one day and said, you know what, I'm taking the gig.
Well, he's going to have a good supporting cast. I mean, what we've seen about the coaches, Jeff Fisher, Hugh Jackson, go on down the list of guys, Brandon
Rod
Fisher,
Woodson.
Rod Woodson. I mean,
What is
the
Rod
list of
Woodson?
rumored coaching staff additions shows you that he's going to have a really good supporting cast. It's going to help him a lot of this. So
Right.
that ability to ask questions, get to the bottom of something, take in outside ideas, the circle he's going to insulate himself with is going to help in that regard.
Now let's go with that. Rod Woodson. Hall of Fame guy. If Rod Woodson wants to coach, he can't get a job that's better than being an assistant on Eddie George's staff at TSU? This kind of mystifies me.
Yeah,
I'm sure he could. I mean, the last time he coached was with the Raiders.
Yeah, why wouldn't Rod Woodson go to Purdue, his alma mater, and be a coach on the staff if he really wanted to? I'm with you. It baffles me that this level of guy, and Jeff Fisher, I'll say also.
I don't know that Jeff Fisher's going to be on the staff.
But still,
we haven't heard
if
that
Jeff
yet.
Fisher, if Jeff Fisher was interested in Montana State, if I'm Montana State, I'm hiring Jeff Fisher.
Yeah, but that's as a head coach.
In a heartbeat.
I know.
As head coach.
I agree.
I'd have no qualms about hiring Jeff Fisher. Now, if I'm Tennessee, I'm not hiring Jeff Fisher. If I'm Auburn, I'm not hiring Jeff Fisher. If I'm Vandy, I'm not hiring Jeff Fisher. If I'm Montana State, I'm absolutely hiring Jeff Fisher.
Agree.
I don't get that part of it.
Here's the other thing, and I thought this was maybe Eddie's most interesting answer. He was asked about the biggest challenge, and he wound for a minute. And we saw him thinking on his feet, and then he got to it. And he got to it very good. Understanding what's needed by these kids, what these kids need, figuring out who they are and what they need. Which is a very simple answer, and which I think if you're a kid in the Tennessee State football program, which is what the football program's about, first and foremost, the kids in the football program, he landed right in the right spot on that. And I think that was the last question he took in a pretty short press conference, where also there wasn't a last question. You know, they asked for more questions, there wasn't one. But he landed on the kids, and that's...
And there are layers to that answer. I mean, one of the first things I believe he'll do is ask for I think he wants to play those games at Hell Stadium, and he wants to because first off, Hell Stadium is in a solid location going into campus there. And so if you drive in, you're going to a basketball game, for instance. If you haven't been to a football game there, everywhere you go, there's a TSU logo or a Tigers logo going into the stadium. The stadium is in need of repair and upgrade.
Yes.
But I don't think the location needs to change.
No, it's
and
right.
I think there's an investment. There's an investment there that could be made. I think will be made. I'm sure Eddie asked for certain things on this, where it can become one of the better facilities in the conference. If you think about it, I'm not putting it up there with Austin Peay and what they've done, but site for site, it can be one of the genuine football fabric locations of the OVC.
If you don't know where the stadium is, it's kind of across the street and down a little from where Isaiah Wilson considered jumping off the balcony.
Yeah, right.
That's a historic
When
landmark.
I was over there poking around, that's how I found it.
It's a historic landmark, much like Limelight was for Pac-Man Jones and Big Daddy Gaddy. So very important part of Titans history.
Yeah, I should put together a little bus
But
tour
here's-
of all those places.
Here's what
With a hot tub in it.
It ends with John Rich's bar.
be great.
And
To
John
your
Rich's
right,
house.
this is where one of the 5 places where Pac-Man Jones spat on a woman.
We started John Rich's home that drove me out of my neighborhood, and we ended John Rich's bar, where I encouraged
If you look to the
people
left,
to
this is the
urinate on the
Inferno
floor.
Club in Murfreesboro, where Pac-Man Jones allegedly spit on someone and broke their chain. So the thing that Austin Peay and their stadium doesn't have is Nashville.
That's great. Yeah, you're
right.
You're
So
right.
I mean, I think the broader point about stadium improvements and everything else. Here's the other thing: TSU's always been a good player in terms of Power 5 drop downs.
Mm-hmm.
Players transferring from Florida or LSU,
true.
picking TSU. You think it's even more desirable now that it's Eddie George? And with all due respect to Rod Reed, who I think did a good job there, you don't keep a job that long without doing a good job, and a TSU guy, I don't see a single player wanting to transfer now that Rod Reed's out and Eddie George is in.
But
It's hard to think about guys that are like, well, now I'm leaving because this isn't my guy.
You're going to stay and see.
Yep.
At the very least.
Well, you're energized again, and it's also going to be tough to transfer because of the quick turnaround.
Yep.
Think about how quick now he's got to get things going, both on the recruiting trail for next year. But I mean, they're about to kick off in a handful of months.
They just finished a season, and there's no spring football to get ready for the fall season.
Yeah, and it's literally just around the corner.
And he mentioned that they're tired. Eddie said,
Yeah.
these kids are tired.
Well, yeah, I'm sure
He
they
hasn't
are.
met them yet, but he knows that.
Yeah. So best of luck to Eddie George. We are thrilled for him and the opportunity, But also, props to TSU for thinking outside the box here. We applaud that, especially at that level, and acknowledging, look, this is a strategic move. And let's also point this out before the break. This is a strategic move not for the football program, not for the athletic department, but for the university. And Eddie pointed this out. One of the first things he said whenever he got to the Q&A portion of this, and maybe it was at the podium.
It was.
The football program lifts the university. It is the front porch to the university. And that is exactly what the TSU Tigers football program will be now with Eddie George at the helm. He is the spokesman for Tennessee State University, not the football program. He speaks on behalf of TSU, and everything that they show on the field and during the week will echo that of that TSU mantra. That is a fantastic hire because of that aspect.
Totally agree.
I think
Well said.
there's a huge curiosity for everybody to see how this thing pans out. And has this city ever been this curious about TSU since the days of John Merritt?
No. But, and again, it goes back to where would you put TSU in the interest level among the other OVC schools in state?
And you know my interest
can't-
level of those schools is
I
zero.
can't, but you know, Austin P was doing okay. Tennessee Tech, whenever I check the scores, they're leading in games. So
Martin has nice helmets.
my point is, I can't think of another hire that would have been within a framework of a hire, not outside the box, that would have done the same thing.
Past MTSU already. We agree on that in terms of interest.
Yeah,
And
just
then we're not talking about
intrigue.
just
Yeah,
OVC.
intrigue.
And I'll say this, if Vandy didn't have a new coach and an alumni in Clark Lee, it'd be pretty close in terms of pizzazz and interest in programs. That's an SEC program in your city.
Though I will say, as much as we bash that Vanderbilt Stadium, the whole is.
Oh yeah. Well, but again, I don't get me wrong. The Clark Lee hire re-energizes Vandy a little bit more to where they're ahead of TSU on the pecking
And
order
the teams
for sure.
that are coming in to play Vanderbilt.
But
There's also
I think
a
we all
different
agree
standard.
it would be closer.
Yeah, a whole different
It would be
standard.
closer if you were going into another year with Derek Mason.
TSU would take $50 million a year on a TV contract and do something with it.
You would hope.
Vandy's finally done.
Well, finally.
Fingers crossed.
But we're comparing stadiums.
Shovels still have to go in the ground, but
We're
fingers
comparing
crossed
stadiums.
it's happening.
And they also, what is it, a 12 to 14,000 seat stadium?
Yeah, it's different.
Yeah, it should never be talked about in the same
Different level.
breath. That you could even envision a scenario where you would talk about them together is an indictment of old Vanderbilt.
Coming up, I propose a show bet for OutKick 360 and maybe for all the viewers. Straight ahead, OutKick 360 rolls on. It is OutKick 360. You can follow the show on Twitter at OutKick 360. And if you're a new user for FanDuel, go to FanDuel.com/OK360 and you can place up to $1,000 risk-free bet for new users at FanDuel Sportsbook. FanDuel.com/OK360.
Can we make a collective apology, mostly focused on me, to FanDuel people? Because last week we had a good offer, a very good offer that said, join FanDuel and you get what? Huge odds on one of these three guys making the cut. And I said, Dustin Johnson is making the cut. You'd be crazy not to jump in here and take just Dustin Johnson to make the cut. And then I was texting these guys Friday around noon. It's like, yeah, Dustin Johnson's not making the cut.
But it seemed impossible. But also, you could also.
I would have gone with that bet, Paul.
You could have
gone Spieth.
You could have gone Spieth or McIlroy.
Yeah.
On
How
top
about
of that.
Dustin Johnson not making the cut? And how much fun must it be to miss the cut and hang out for 2 days to put the green jacket on someone else after you miss it?
You know what? It's got to be a blast because you have won a green jacket. You just had your champions dinner a few days prior. Who cares?
You start drinking, crack open a bottle.
And Cena's at his rental house, whatever they rented, because they're not going to the course.
Right.
I don't think he's going to sit around and walk,
But are you watching the match? Well, what are you
you're
doing?
watching.
He's probably watching.
Yeah, you're watching.
And drinking.
You're drinking. Yeah, you're definitely drinking.
And just taking it in. I mean, for at least for 1 year,
You can handle that.
you can handle it. I would think.
Well, the next year you don't have to put the jacket on anybody, so you don't have to stay if you miss the cut. You can get out of Dodge.
Curious if we should lay some money on the Preds tonight. Because we have not seen them have success against their opponent they're facing. They're fourth in the playoff spot right now in the Central. 2 points ahead of Chicago with 13 games to go. 3 head-to-head matchups with the Blackhawks coming up. Nashville, 6 points ahead of Dallas, and that's why we featured Dallas up here as well. They're favored by 1.5 over Florida. And Dallas and Chicago have 2 games against each other left. So we're seeing the playoff picture form here. But here's Nashville tonight, hosting Tampa Bay. The final matchup, finally, between the Preds and the Lightning for the regular season. And we could see this down the road.
Right at the end of the
But
tunnel.
Nashville is 1-6 this season against Tampa Bay.
Jeez.
Tampa, one of the best teams in the league. Nashville playing among the best teams right now, except against the Lightning.
Are you saying money line?
I'm saying money line against for the Predators.
Well,
Something's got to
I'm
change.
thinking about a
mind
parlay
change here.
My mind says absolutely not. Would I bet on the Preds in this game? But my mind has led me to lose almost every bet I've made in the last 2 weeks. So I feel like I should go against my own mind and bet on the Preds the way your suggestion
Forgive
is
me
now,
for
Paul,
reading between the lines here and
my
trying to read
assumptions
the
mean
tea leaves.
nothing.
The vote of confidence yesterday by David Poyle. Does that give a little energy to the roster?
Well, I feel like the last time David Poole gave this roster a vote of confidence, they sucked following
The vote of
a run.
confidence
And we're going to
meaning-
run it back, and then they did not reward David Poyle with
The
his
vote of confidence being that they made one move. They were a buyer for a back-end defenseman. But my overall point is they didn't trade away any assets or trade for assets in return for a current player that's playing well.
The one thing I wish I understood better about FanDuel, and this is probably me being a dumb bettor.
Yeah.
Like I immediately looked at that and I thought, well, if we're going to do it, I would take moneyline Preds and under the 5.5 goals.
Yes.
But then FanDuel says 2 or more selections from the same event can't be combined in a parlay. They often have same-game parlays, but oftentimes
one of
the
their
categories I pick, they don't let me combine, and I want an explanation as why I can't combine those 2 categories. I'd go in on a little for the Preds to win. I'm not going all in.
Let's put everything in the middle.
Again, I would say no, absolutely not. They're not beating Tampa, but I've been so bad at this that I want to go against my own inclination and ride with Hutton on this. Yeah, let's put it on the Preds. Let's go.
All right, I'm in for a little bit.
Let's roll that.
Nashville, 6 points ahead of Dallas, 3 games in hand on the Stars. We will see them down the road. They have, let me look at their upcoming schedule. Forgive me for not having this proper
Well, let me read this
here.
while you're looking for
that.
that.
Tonight against Tampa, and then they head to Carolina for 2 games.
Okay, so Poyle decides to stand pat, adds a little, and says that he actually has been, decided a month ago that he was all in with staying with this roster, right? That he hasn't been thinking sell hardly at all. John Glennon at Broadway Sports Media writes this: 7 of the Predators' final 13 games will be played against the top 3 teams in the division: Tampa Bay, Carolina, and Florida. Those 3 opponents, the Predators are 3-13-1 so far this year, which, considering Nashville would have to play one in the first round of the postseason, doesn't seem to bode well for a lengthy playoff stay. So is Poyle lulled to sleep by the recent success? Then you play those 3 teams that you stink against for the end of the month, end of the season. Then you play one of them in the postseason, you're knocked out, and you had all this confidence in a run that didn't really have much meaning because these 3 teams are going to dictate your fate.
Meanwhile, Dallas, who has the best odds at catching Nashville, because again, Nashville has played more games than Dallas to this point, their schedule is extremely favorable coming up over the next week and a half, 2 weeks. They will play against the Panthers, but then they will host the Blue Jackets twice. And then they have 4 straight games against the Red Wings.
4 games in a row against the same team. Dear
but
God.
keep in mind, Dallas has had some stoppages throughout the season.
Yeah.
So that's why you see the Nashville schedule that's ahead of Dallas, but why the next few games that Glenn Gleno's pointing out here, extremely important for the Preds, with the stretch coming up where Dallas's opponents not nearly as competitive for the postseason as Nashville's.
So are the Preds better, and they're going to build on 3-13-1 against these teams and be competitive against one of them in the first round? That's what Poyle's betting on. But if they're not, he's blown it.
Well, it's hard not to bet on the team and how they're playing right now over the last 4 or 5 weeks. It really is.
You get the hot goaltender.
Well, but beyond that,
you
we've seen this team, not just a team. We have seen this franchise get into the back end of a playoff run and get hot at the right time and make a push down the path of the playoffs. So,
I'll say again, though, what you've said, Hutton, and I'm applauding you on this. He didn't have to stay all the way in or go all the way out. Mm-hmm. There is some middle ground here where you could play for the present and the future at the same time.
For the right offer, though. You're not giving
his job.
You're not giving. No, it's another general manager's job to make an offer that's favorable for them.
Well, he can be making the offers also.
Well, you can offer up Matthias Ekholm all you want to, as long as you're going to get something in return for him that's going to be more value than the contract you're willing to give him.
But he made it sound like he wasn't a seller at all, so he's not out there working to find the right price. He's got to do his part.
I think for the right price, there were some guys who are available. The problem is the players who are available don't have those massive contract numbers, and they're actually favorable with the money that they're making right now on the Preds roster.
It's a difficult spot.
They have some bad contracts.
And look, I'm all about go for it now. I just wonder, we saw this team play some really bad hockey for a stretch. And those numbers right there against those 3 teams, 3-13-1. Even if you turn better, how much better? And is better enough to get out of the first round against one of those 3 teams conceivably?
They've been much better. They've been much better against bad teams. I don't see this as a team unless they completely turn it around that is even going to compete in a playoff series with whoever they're going to face.
And if they don't, then 2 years from now we're going to be looking back saying, boy, was that 2021 season worth not doing anything? I don't
maybe.
know. Hindsight's magical.
If a playoff run sells more season tickets, which behind the scenes we haven't heard much of. By the way, season tickets are available for next year for the Predators for the first time in a while.
Yeah, they need home games.
They need momentum.
Home playoff games.
And to be a seller right now, I do think there's some behind the scenes. They need a winner. They need to be able to sell a winner after being shut down.
Well, they need to
for
be
a year
able to
and a half.
sell a winner, and they need those home gates, which means they need a second series to get a second set of home gates to get that.
Well, I don't even know. I'm not even
money.
talking about attendance right now. I'm talking about next season. Season tickets are available when normally people are begging for the opportunity to buy them.
Yeah, because they've run their course on those.
And I'm not saying that's
tickets
just a Preds issue. It's a league-wide problem, but specifically to the market, I think it's important that they make the postseason for that reason.
So they've run their course on the season tickets that they sold out of the Stanley Cup run. Now.
Well, the key
Right?
phrase there is
3 years.
playoff run. You said a playoff run and what it would sell. I don't see them going on a playoff run. I see them getting beaten badly in one playoff series at this point.
Don't we?
Unless they start to show that they can have some success against these better teams that they're going to be going up against.
But
now.
I guess my point is there's no guarantee one way or the other when you get into the NHL playoff, the Stanley Cup playoffs, what's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't.
And because of that, if you're saying make the playoffs or not, is it important for this team to make the
Oh,
postseason?
it absolutely is.
Yes.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
instead of just saying, you know what, sell the farm and let's restart. 2 months ago, the signals were this team wasn't going to sniff the postseason.
Yeah.
They would have been Detroit right now, at which point I would have been
Absolutely
standing
sell the
up
farm.
adamant that they have to get rid of players in order to gain assets for the future. And now standing and staying put on where they are, where they need 26 points over the next 13 games, their final 13 games. That's the magic number for them. I don't mind the fact that they were able to sit tight and they didn't just jump on an offer for Ekholm, or he's the example, or anyone, just because another team came calling.
I would think that they would get an increased gate. I haven't been following what's going on there, but vaccines are going pretty strong now. I know Chad and I are next week getting our second dose.
I'm not
2
talking
weeks
about the
removed
increased
from
gate in
that.
the
No,
postseason.
I'm
One
going-
gate's not going
No,
to.
I know.
I'm talking about the longevity
I
of
know.
a 3-year commitment in the pocketbook.
I know, but I was changing the subject there. And if they get an increased gate and more people in the building for that, it'll help them financially. And then those people, if they see what they see, are more likely to be the people that buy some of those season tickets, which will help.
I just, the way they're pushing season ticket sales right now, I think
It's a
there's a
hard
story
sell.
behind the scenes that we haven't thoroughly asked about.
No, their financial health has been something we've talked amongst ourselves about, and there's not a lot of information.
And it's been incredible
available.
what they've been able to pull out because of that venue, which is normally booked 4 out of 7 days during the week. I mean, on average,
Yeah.
you could say there's a concert going on. There's
Monster trucks or
There's
whatever.
something in that venue other than Predators hockey when there's not Predators hockey being played. And for that building to sit empty for the last 13 months, it's incredible to have them where they are.
And we've seen a Canadian-based team, and this was pre-pandemic, have trouble paying a hotel bill in Texas. You know, the financial
Yeah,
quality of some of these teams.
And they're
is to be
expanding the
questioned.
league.
It's-
Expanding the league. Now, Seattle's going to be a very sturdy franchise, but also, this ESPN contract we need to look into. That's going to do wonders for the NHL, being back on ESPN, a channel that you're going to flip past and see a game. I don't know. I'm like you. I don't love that it's on there because I don't love hockey, but it's good for hockey.
No one's flipping channels anymore, is the thing. So
Well, if
I
you're
don't
going
think
to
people are
Sports
flipping
Center-
by and going to it. The help is the promotional aspect.
Yes.
Every ESPN
It's on
property,
SportsCenter more.
website, everything is promoting hockey more. That's the benefit. But
Yeah.
no one's flipping channels anymore like it's 1989. And the
No.
Red Wings are playing the Lightning. I'm going to watch that. But here's the thing.
I do still think there's one thing where you go to look at SportsCenter, and if a game spills over, and
Oh,
you're
yeah.
going to see then you might see the
Yeah.
end of a hockey game. That's
Going
all
back
I
to
mean.
to wrap up the discussion on the Preds, better to go to the playoffs than not go to the playoffs. Certainly, you don't pitch in the season and say, "Boy, we've sucked against the good teams, so why even go to the playoffs and get beat by the good teams?" I get that mentality. I'm telling you, they're going to get beaten badly by one of these better teams unless something crazy happens. Like, wait for it, puck luck.
well,
the puck luck will be on the Preds
They've
side
got
now.
the one thing, though.
Now is the time.
They've got
Hey.
the one thing that spins a playoff series that shouldn't spin, that can flip a playoff series. A goalie who's playing right now very well and can play very well.
Puck luck.
And Pekka wasn't that playoff goalie, but maybe Soros is.
Puck luck. Ask Matt Duchene. It's going to be on their
If it's
side.
all
I'm with you
about-
on the
They didn't
puck
have it
luck
last
BS.
time. Puck
If it's
luck.
all
It's all
about
about luck.
puck-
Just flip coins.
If it's just puck luck, then what are we doing discussing the sport?
I would ask that question.
We collectively are on the same page.
I've
But I
asked
think-
that question since that
I
statement.
think the goalie can give them a chance to beat a team they shouldn't beat. That's what happens in hockey playoffs. It hasn't happened for them.
That's right. So are we going all in? I'm looking at
By all in, I mean, what's your all in bet? I don't
We
need to
are
get into the
going-
finance. I made the bet.
I'm going to bet because I've been terrible
Go ahead, Chad.
betting, and I'm going with Hutton.
All
I'm
right.
going against
Yes.
my own inclination. I'm going with Hutton. I can tell you this, we are definitely going all in on a new favorite nation status.
Can we bet Danny's salary on the game tonight?
I don't know.
I'm
Can we
looking for
have
Lance and Jacob.
Let's do a
We're trying to
parlay.
make Lance and
Can we
Jacob
combine
as
Danny
possible.
and Becca and Emma, and we figure that we go all in?
Here's what I want to do: is Pred's money line, and is Danny awake right now?
Well, better odds.
We've got a new favorite nation on this show. We got to get to that.
Oh yes.
Yes.
All rise for the
we
national
hear
anthem.
from another country next. Wrapping up OutKick 360, you can find the podcast for the full show wherever you download your podcast. And we hope you'll subscribe, give us a rating, and a review, much like the review from Azure Fan, 5-star rating, and this review from Azerbaijan. I'm excited to have a podcast as an option. I'm currently living and working in Azerbaijan, and getting to listen to the guys talk about sports and whatever else makes me feel a little closer to my hometown of Nashville. Now I can catch up with my Titans, actually hear real constructive criticisms of teams that I like from Paul. Keep up the good work, guys. We love the 5-star rating, and we salute you, Azerbaijan.
You guys
We
are
add
very-
Azerbaijan to favored nation status on
Cross it off
OutKick
the list.
360. If you're listening or watching in a foreign land, please let us know where you're listening or watching and give us a review like that one. And who knows, Paul may salute your national anthem on this very program by simply submitting that review.
I thought it was disrespectful that you guys didn't stand up. We had a trivia question in my house. My sister's visiting the other night. Countries that begin with A. And sadly, I forgot Azerbaijan.
Really?
So I apologize.
Is it
I wouldn't forget it now.
What was the country where we had the gentleman? We named the country. I can't. It would. Forgive me. Where we were going to have the World Cup played.
Qatar.
Qatar or Qatar
Qatar.
or Qatar.
It used to be
We
Qatar.
said
Now it's
Qatar. but
We
now
said
it's
Qatar, and then there was someone that was working a job in Qatar who called us
Yeah.
live
That
on
was a
the
big
air
show
to
moment.
confirm
Yes.
that it was Qatar.
Look
So-
at all this evidence of our international presence.
So I
Doha.
wonder
They were in
if
Doha.
Azure Fan could confirm on maybe another review. Is it Azerbaijan or Bajan? I don't know.
Bajan sounds right to me.
Well, you said Bajan.
Bajan sounds.
But I don't know.
I stumbled on it.
It sounds churched up. It sounds like Dijon. You know?
But it looks
It's
like
not Dijon.
It
it's
looks like
Dijon.
Bajan.
For the record, Austria,
Their
Algeria,
anthem also sounds like a death march too. By the way.
Yes.
Austria, Algeria, and
Someone was
thanks
executed
to
to
Coach.
that-
Coach made very
that song
popular
recently.
Albania.
Oh
Albania's
yeah,
good.
Albania.
Border on the Adriatic.
Armenia.
Armenia.
Azerbaijan, shout out, and we love that we're getting that review on Apple Podcast.
Terrific.
You can find the
Now, a bunch
podcast.
of-
We do mention wherever you download podcasts. There are, I found this out, there are so many options for podcasts beyond just Apple, Stitcher, and Spotify.
Podbean.
And OutKick has found them. They're all over the place. Please subscribe, rate, and review. Share the link daily for us on Twitter on the video replay. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you have an Amazon product, just ask Alexa to search OutKick on YouTube. The show will pop up immediately.
Periodically, we forget, or I do, or I think collectively there we did, to describe what we're doing for those very podcasts. So during that national anthem, I stood, which resulted in my head being cut out of the frame
Should we-
with my hand over
And
my
resulted
heart.
in us laughing. That's
Should
why
we
the
all
laughter
rise
was
Just
occurring.
the
to
laugh.
wrap up the show?
I think we
It's
should.
too late now.
It's too late now. Well, I mean,
Can this play us out?
Jacob can play us out.
Can you play us out?
To play us out.
I got to get my
We'll do it
earpiece.
live.
We'll do it live. Don't lock the
Azerbaijan,
box. Do
we
lock
salute
the
you.
locks. Even in Azerbaijan.
Catch you tomorrow.